Hi booktube, Aaron here, hope you're doing very well. Today I'm going to be doing a bit of a random reading update. Since the beginning of April I've finished a few things and so I thought I'd go through them with you. We've got, I suppose, one work of fiction, but we'll get into what I think of it, whether it's fiction or not, a letter collection and some Icelandic sagas. So we'll start with the sagas, and these were very short. I was reading along for Saga Long, which is an annual event that is currently being spearheaded by Vin from Revenant Reads, and we were reading the Vinland Sagas, which is a grouping of two sagas that tell two slightly different versions of the same story. And the Vinland sagas consist of the saga of the Greenlanders and Erik the Red's saga, and they're essentially they're both telling the story of settlers in Greenland, and I think Erik the Red's saga goes into a bit more detail about particularly Erik the Red and other people moving over from Iceland to Greenland, and then a little later on, Erik's son, Leif Erikson, is charged by the King of Norway to convert the people of Greenland to Christianity. And so Leif Erikson, he gets on his boat and essentially, see if there's a map, essentially totally misses Greenland. He sort of sails quite far south of Greenland, and so essentially ends up sort of around Massachusetts, I suppose, maybe a bit further north, and no one knows exactly. And he's sort of tacking up the coast to Newfoundland, and then sort of up, in sort of the Labrador Sea area, until then he eventually spots Greenland, and he finds somewhere that sort of matches the description. So there's a map here in the introduction. So he's started out here in Iceland. He's gone way, missed the mark. Sort of hit Newfoundland, has sort of gone up, and sort of gone up to Labrador, and up to an area that I think they called Helluland. I'm not sure if that's the modern name. And then eventually they noticed Greenland. So they got there in the end. But then they know it's there, and so then it's about the successive trips. There's, I think, one more trip that Leif Erikson makes, and then someone else takes his ship. And it's fascinating, and it's fascinating to see the slight differences between the two sagas. I think as a reading experience goes, the saga of the Greenlanders is a bit better, even though Erik the Red saga is a bit longer. It still feels like there's more detail in the saga of the Greenlanders. I'm not sure if other people who have read them would agree, but that's the impression I got from the two sagas. One of the main differences is this altercation that some of the Greenlanders have with some of the native people of North America, who and they start off trading, and then after a few bouts of trading, then they start fighting, and essentially in one of the altercations, one of the natives picks up an axe, and in one version of the story, in the Saga of the Greenlanders version, he decides to try it on one of his compatriots, and is so shocked that it kills his compatriot that he throws it into the sea. Whereas the other version is that he ends up breaking the axe accidentally, and so then throws it away. And it's just interesting to see the slight differences in the stories, and it's one of those sort of markers that it's a story that's been told orally for generations before it's been written down. So we have these different versions of the same events. But it's also just really fascinating to see these early encounters with the with the with the native people of North America, and it's also it's quite fascinating when there are moments. I think it's in Erik the Red saga where the people that they meet in North America are talking about these other people, and the critics, the academics are unsure exactly who they're referring to, whether they're referring to another tribe, to some other nation that could be out anywhere, or whether it's to do with maybe they have encountered other Europeans. Someone says maybe it's the Irish that they're referring to, and it's just sort of fascinating that there are these little details that contain so much possibility, but we'll never quite know exactly what the what the people telling this story, or what the people writing it down, what the whatever monk it was writing down the stories meant or thought it meant at the time. So and maybe they didn't, and that's why we don't have it. So that's the Vinland sagas. I would recommend them, particularly the saga of the Greenlanders. You can probably find versions of them on Project Gutenberg. I wouldn't be surprised, or I'd say I would be surprised if you couldn't find them. I think they're both translated by Keneva Kunz. And I should also add, I think somewhere around here, just for the sake of giving you an idea of the gap between the events that are purporting to take place and the time that it was committed to paper. So the time of action is estimated to have taken place between 970 and 1030, and the time of writing was anywhere between 1220 and 1280. So we've got a good 200-year difference, and so we could have someone, if you're sort of imagining, how many generations is it back to the Regency period, and just thinking of how much a story could change if it hadn't been written down in that amount of time. Again, it's just really interesting to think about it. Next up, probably the best thing for me in the bunch, and I think one of my favourite things that I've read so far this year was the letters of Vincent Van Gogh, and this is a lovely Penguin classic. It's selected and edited by Ronald de Leeuw, so that's essentially it's sort of taken from a Dutch edition, and then it's been translated then by Arnold Pomerans, and it's just really, really lovely. And the further into this that I got, the more and more impressed I was with the work that particularly Ronald de Leeuw, the editor of this book, had done, because it's just wonderfully knit together. So we have the best part of this whole book is Vincent van Gogh's letters to his brother Theo van Gogh. There are also some letters to his sister Vil, and to his mother, and to other friends. I'm trying to remember the name of one of the artists, something Bernard or Bernard something. I won't find it now. But also there are a few letters to Gauguin and a few other people. And you essentially get, a good portion of, or really all of Vincent van Gogh's adult life, of his first venturing out with his first proper job, to wanting to become an artist and to self-train and to sort of become an apprentice artist, to get instruction from other artists, and then to yeah, to just live for art. And it's really, really lovely. There's bridging material. There's a wonderful introduction, and then we have bridging material introducing us, giving us an idea of what exactly was going on. So they've drawn off other letters to, sort of between other family members, giving you an idea of what was going on in the family, and maybe letters that Theo was writing to other people, and things like that, so that we have the correspondence between the two, but then we have the gathering of information to sort of contextualize the conversations that they're having. And it's just really, really fascinating. They do a really good job of, I think the editors in the letters they selected and in the bridging material do a good job of addressing and debunking many of the sort of myths about Van Gogh. The one that they particularly don't like was the idea that he was some kind of loner, some kind of I'm trying to think of the word now. The word's gone out of my head, but yeah, a kind of loner, a sort of antisocial person, a misanthrope. That's what I was thinking of. But he was anything but that. He was really generous and hospitable, and warm-hearted, and I get the impression that he did really have an effect on the lives of the people around him. And so yeah, I really love this. It starts out with his first job. He started out as an art dealer, and he moved over to London and learned English when he was quite young. One of the really lovely things about this book is that Van Gogh was a very keen reader, and so we have his musings on Shakespeare and on Dickens and on George Eliot. He was a big fan of George Eliot, a big fan of Emile Zola, and Guy de Maupassant and Balzac. And later in life, he really gets into Dostoevsky, particularly later in life when he's been admitted to a mental institution, and he can sort of relate a lot with a lot of what Dostoevsky wrote. But yeah, he starts out as an art dealer, moves eventually to Paris, and then he loses the job because I think particularly in his time in Paris, he's sort of filled with this religious fervour. I think that's one of the interesting things, actually, and I wasn't expecting it to be as interesting as I found it, was the early, very sort of energetically religious side of Van Gogh, from particularly in his early life. And he wanted to be a preacher and a missionary and all of that. And so he ended up going back to England, just outside of London, initially as a teacher in a school, but also then was preaching in, I think, Methodist churches. And maybe one of the strangest things in here is that there's a sermon from Vincent van Gogh that he'd written down to give to his brother Theo. And it seems to be that whatever he was ever obsessed with, he would just muse rhapsodically to Theo. And so when he was in this very religious phase, he was sort of sending him his sermons and things like that. And then when sort of art takes over, and it's something they've both got a bug for. They both love it. It's a shared interest for the two of them, since Theo ended up being an art dealer as well. Then that's a language that they can share. And then there's a lot of gushing in there. And also they both love books and shared books and sent books to each other. So there are a few letters that I thought I'd share with you. This is one. Yeah, so this is after he's decided to become an artist. I think it's, before he's left for Paris. He's in trying to work out where he'd be around this point. So he's probably in either Drenthe or Newnan, so still in the Low Countries. And I thought I'd read this. It's a bit of his thinking about art, and also some practical considerations there as well, since once Vincent sort of gave his life over to be an artist, he was sort of depending on Theo to keep him afloat, and sometimes it seemed as if he was living almost in poverty. So he says, 18th of August 1883, "Dear brother, I wish you could understand that there are various things about which I must be consistent. You know what an error de point of view is in painting, namely something quite different from, and much worse than, the faulty drawing of some detail or other. A single point determines the inclination, and whether the side plane to the left or the right of the object is more fully developed throughout the composition. Well, there is something similar in life. When I say that I am a poor painter and still have years of struggle to face, that I have to arrange my daily life a peu près like some farm labourer or like a factory worker, then that is a fixed point from which many things follow, and these things are taken out of context if they are viewed otherwise than as a whole. There are painters in different circumstances who can and must act differently. Each one has to decide for himself. Of course, if I had other opportunities, were in different circumstances, and nothing decisive had happened that would have influenced my actions. Now, however, and a plus forte raison, with all the more reason, if there were the slightest question of my being accused of presuming rights to which I have no claim, even if it turned out that I had such rights après tout, after all, the mere suggestion of it would make me withdraw of my own accord from association with people of certain standing, even from my family. So we are faced with this fact, my firm resolve to be dead to everything except my work. However, it is hard for me to speak about things that would really be quite simple were they not unfortunately bound up with much deeper questions. Nothing causes more anguish than an inner struggle between duty and love, both considered in their highest sense. When I tell you that I choose my duty, everything will be plain to you. Just a word on the subject during our walk made me realise that nothing in me had changed as far as that was concerned, that it is and remains a wound I have to live with, but one that is buried deep and cannot be healed. Years from now it will be as it was on the first day. I hope you understand what a struggle I have lately with myself. Still, quoi qu'il en soit, I don't know French, whatever happens, without calling that quoi into question, for I have no right to inquire into it, I will be on my qui le vive to remain a man of honour and doubly attentive to duty. And it sort of goes on, but just that sort of sense of commitment I found really, really lovely. And the fact that he really means it, and the fact that he really gives himself to it, is wonderful. A really fascinating, really odd thing about his life in that period in the lowlands, when he's I'd say first starting out, but it's a really long period where he's trying to learn to paint and trying to get his painting out there for the first time, and meeting other painters of the Hague school. One of the really interesting things from this period is that he ends up inviting into his home a woman called Sien, who, so as it is in here, it said that he met her when she was already pregnant, and that she'd been impregnated by a past, I don't know whether it was a lover, I don't think it was a husband who'd walked out on her, but the man wouldn't do the right thing and marry her, or at least look after her and make sure she was provided for. and so she was on the streets. Presumably, it sort of implied that she'd had to depend on prostitution, even though she was pregnant. And so Van Gogh decided to take her in, and he didn't really have much to give, but he decided to share his food with her and give her a place to stay. And once the child was born, he'd marry her and take them on as his family. And it was just really interesting how quickly he seemed to have decided to do that. It didn't work out in the end, but they were together for quite some time, even after the child was born. And then he goes to Paris. We don't have many letters from his time in Paris, because he was staying with Theo, who by that time was an art dealer. And it's sort of interesting. I think by the end of it, Van Gogh looked quite bleakly on his time in Paris, I think, other than the fact that he was with Theo. Theo wasn't really initially looking forward to Van Gogh coming to stay with him. However, particularly by the time he'd gone, he realised how much he missed him, and I think that may have been the period that really cemented their relationship. I know that before he turned up in Paris, their relationship, even though they're brothers, their friendship was kind of on the rocks. And yet, I think, Vincent he felt indebted to Theo for his, financial support. But something that I think Theo never really managed to express, or we can never see because we don't have many of Theo's letters, is Theo felt apparently very indebted to Van Gogh for his sort of networking, I suppose, of artists, of impressionist artists in Paris at the time, and of sort of giving Theo this sort of little world to be a part of. And he felt that he'd really enriched his life, in a way that he'd never would have been able to do on his own. And so it was lovely to see that. And then, famously, then Van Gogh decides to go down to the south of France, to Provence, to Arles, and many reasons. I think maybe the main one was his health. He was definitely drinking too much, so the warmer weather was sure to do him some good, and probably to get away from all of the absinthe or whatever it was he was drinking in that period, and also famously to see what the light was like there under the southern sun, to find sort of new colours and things, and there's a new vibrancy in his paintings in his time in Paris, but then even more so then when he's in Arles. And what I loved about his time in Arles, even though it goes disastrously, he then ends up in a mental institution. He himself decides to go there because of his essentially blackouts, where he he has no idea what he's doing during them, and can't remember them, and can't believe when people tell him what he's been doing. He can't believe that it was really him doing it. So that they really shook him. I think for one, just for anyone, it would be scary if you're, if that's your life, and you never know what you might do next. It must be really scary existence, and obviously it must be frightening for people around you as well. But also then the way that when he's recovering after these, for want of a better word, sort of blackouts. I think he refers to them as lapses or something like that. It takes time for him to do that, and he can't paint. And even though he's in his mid-30s, he already has this sense that he's not going to live for a very long time. I don't think he was planning to end his life at that point. I don't think he had particularly solid plans to end his life when he did end it. He didn't feel like he was going to have a very long life, and so wanted to get as much done as he could to create a whole oeuvre where the paintings sort of spoke to each other, and so that side of things sort of depressed him, quite significantly. So that's why he eventually had himself put into the institution at Saint Remy. But before that, he had his famous yellow house, and he really wanted to set up an artists' colony. And I think this was what I loved out of all of it, which is the hospitable side to Van Gogh. You saw it a little bit with Tien, with the woman that he wanted to marry and look after her child, and sort of start a household. And then later on, it becomes this vision to create this painters' colony, this sort of cooperative vision. And I'm not sure how much of this to read you, but it's just a letter to Theo. He's hoping that Gauguin is going to come and stay with him. He eventually does. It goes terribly. But he says this: for visitors, there'll be the prettiest room upstairs, which I shall do my best to turn into something like the boudoir of a really artistic woman. Then there will be my own bedroom, which I want to keep extremely simple, but with large, solid furniture, bed, chairs, table, all in deal. Downstairs, the studio, and another room, also a studio, but a kitchen at the same time. One day you'll see a picture of the little house itself in bright sunshine, or else with the window lit up and the starry sky. From now on, you can consider yourself the owner of a country house here in Arles, because I'm very eager to arrange it so that you'll be happy in it, and to turn it into a studio clearly designed as such. If, say, you came for a holiday here in Marseille in a year's time, it will be ready, and I intend the house to be filled with pictures from top to bottom by then. The room you'll stay in then, or which will be Gauguin's if Gauguin comes, will have white walls hung with large yellow flowers. In the morning, when you open the window, you'll see the green of the gardens and the rising sun and the road into town. And you'll see these big pictures of bunches of 12 or 14 sunflowers crammed into this tiny boudoir with its pretty bed, and everything else elegantly done. Elegantly done. It will be something special. I just love that. I love his excitement for creating a home, and more than anything, wanting to share it. So I really, really love this, and it was fascinating, and I'm sure it'll be something that I'll be returning to again in the future. So yeah, the Letters of Van Gogh, I would recommend it if you like his work, or if you're interested in his life. I think if you're into 19th century literature as well, I think you do fine with it. I think it sort of feels like a novel almost, with the way it's been arranged. So yeah, a hearty recommendation there. And then finally, I'll hopefully won't go on for quite so long with this one. The next book is Água Viva by Clarice Lispector, quite a short thing. And for the first time I've used these tab things. I don't particularly like them. I don't think I'll do it again. I'm keeping them in so I can find some things to read to you. But Água Viva is essentially it's sort of the thoughts of this person, this painter, but also a writer, who is, I was going to say trying to understand herself. That's not quite right. She's trying to find the instant, or trying to understand what an instant is and how you can maybe use up its potential. I suppose it might be kind of mindfulness, or sort of being grounded, or something like that. It might be a way of explaining it. But I think I read out the first paragraph before. Let's get the first page of the book. So yeah, she says, "Let me tell you, I'm trying to seize," this is the second paragraph, Let me tell you, I'm trying to seize the fourth dimension of this instant now, so fleeting that it's already gone, because it's already become a new instant now that's also already gone. Everything has an instant in which it is. I want to grab hold of the is of the thing, these instants passing through the air I breathe. In fireworks they explode silently into space. I want to possess the atoms of time. And then she goes on into wanting to capture it. And it sort of goes from point to point, but I think that's the sort of central question and central searching of the whole thing, the relationship with time, but not of thinking rhapsodically about the past or hopes for the future, but instead to be as present as possible and to understand each second as possible. Here's a random bit that is quite funny. But eternally is a very hard word. It has a gigantic T in the middle. Eternity for everything that has ever began, that has never began, I should say. My small, ever so limited head bursts when thinking about something that doesn't begin and doesn't end, for that is the eternal. So yeah, there's a lot of that, but there's something really compelling, I think. There's something very vital and arresting to the writing style. I'll see if I can find one. There are bits where she's essentially writing, and then she's like, right, I'm going now, and then she says, okay, I'm back in the in the next paragraph. Yeah, here we go. So here we go. If I'd ever known that it were like that, I wouldn't have been born. Ah, if I'd known, I wouldn't have been born. Madness borders the cruelest good sense. This is a brain tempest, and one sentence barely has anything to do with the next. I swallow the madness that is no madness. It's something else. Do you understand me? But I'll have to stop because I'm so tired. Because I'm so tired that only dying could release me from this fatigue. I'm leaving. I'm back. Now I'll try once more to bring myself up to date with whatever occurs to me in the moment, and this is how I'll create myself. It's like this. The ring that you gave me was glass, and it broke, and the love ended. But sometimes in its place comes the beautiful hate of those who loved and devoured one another. And it goes on and on and on. It's interesting to think who she's writing to? Who's the you of this? Because there is a you of this all the way through. By the end, I was wondering whether that it was kind of some kind of past lover or something like that. It might also be the reader. It's hard to say. But yeah, it's just wonderful and really intriguing. These tabs aren't doing much aren't helping me much, really. Because one, there are so many of them, and there's no rhyme or reason to the colours that I've used. So yeah, I'll be using them differently. Also, my daughter was having lots of fun with them earlier and pulling them out. so that I also know that the ones I left aren't all there. But this is good. I'll be reading this again. I can already tell that it's a work that stands out to me. I think if you like the Book of Disquiet, you might like this. It's more upbeat, I think, and more life-affirming than the Book of Disquiet. It's kind of like if the Book of Disquiet had a kid with Walt Whitman's Song of Myself. So if the two of those got together and had a child, I think that child would be Água Viva. And it's much shorter than it's shorter than the Book of Disquiet. I'm not sure. It's probably a similar length to Song of Myself. But there we go. I think I'll leave it there. Yeah. still been reading A.E. Starling's poetry, which I've been enjoying a lot, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you about soon, and with whatever else I end up reading in the next few days. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.